stopped at Rome. We stopped at the Republic of Rome.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. How funny. I didn't make any.
Okay, I have to fix my sound here a minute. So just a sec. Hopefully that'll do it. Good morning, everyone. We're about to get going here, and good morning, Art. I have a print for you pulled out now, and hopefully I'll ship it to you tomorrow. I just haven't, because I'm living on 2 floors, or two apartments. It's sometimes hard to get my act together, uh, but anyway, I haven't forgotten you, and we're working on it. Let's see now. Let me set that up in there. And okay, so we're going to continue on with this essay by Casement, who recently died. It's one of those losses that is hard to bear in the Jungian community. She was a major Jungian analyst in the UK and globally. But we can benefit from her wisdom in her article. So the title of the essay is O Tempera, O Mores. And so we'll translate that roughly as "Oh the times, oh the morals." and, uh, and we'll remember the old Chinese curse, "May you live in interesting times." And I'm now wearing my fashion statement, which is wearing black because I'm mourning the loss of my whole generation's goodwill in the international community. So, and I'll be wearing this as long as we're doing things that I don't agree with internationally. But things were bad in mighty Rome as well, and so we might as well look at that and see how it compares to our lives.
What I would say
So,
before we
yeah, go
start
ahead.
on the idea of morals, a lot of people will sit on the laurels of their morals, and I always just suggest to people that, if you need morals and rules to not be a bad person, then you're just a bad person on a leash. And so, be yourself and realize you're probably enough.
Absolutely. That's a great piece of wisdom and advice. Um, and
Or I guess if I've started to call it self-righteous spiritual elitism. Just don't.
Amen. Yep, that's right. So we don't need those morals that other people give us. We need the morals that we see for ourselves. And that's the point.
Well,
Interestingly,
I even find I don't have any anymore. They're the gas in the gas tank. I put it there, so I know what went there. So I'm good with driving without knowing, so to speak, because I know what's pushing. And I think, so that then I have accountability and responsibility for whatever said morals would be. But like you said, they are mine, they are yours. And when they keep equanimity and balance and harmony in my identity, because I'm not doing something poisonous to myself or other people, um, then all so much the better.
Yeah, and driving is a good metaphor because uh, we have municipalities all over the country who have set up driving rules, but by and large, we all accept them without knowing what the driving rules are in this county or that state.
Yeah.
And we all accept them. We all drive carefully as much as we can. Maybe we punch the speed limit about 7 miles an hour. But we keep going,
Right.
and it works. Um, it's only when people don't have those mores that things start to go out of whack, that we start having um, drinking while intoxicated and other issues that are really individual things. People made a decision that they could drink and drive, and now they've killed somebody or they've killed themselves. And
Well, I'm glad you said mores, because mores and moorings are much different than morals. Morals are kind of an external, superficial, artificial, look at how good I am. I'm, staying in line. Whereas mores and moorings are groundings that keep you solid and stable.
yeah, um, Cherie says that her cat died this morning and her daughter isn't taking it well, so she might have to leave
Sorry for your
early. And my condolences for the loss of your companion. And anyway, um, the world goes round and we are living creatures. We have a limit. And
blessings
so,
to your memories.
pardon?
I
Yeah,
said
blessings for the memories. Absolutely. Uh,
the prayers that continue.
Amen. Okay. Greetings to Aristotle in a bottle. What a good name. What a good handle. Okay. We are on page 322 of this book. Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions, edited by Mary Stein and Thomas Arst. And we are in volume 1. There are 5 volumes in this series. And we are on page 322 if you have the book. Okay, the Republic of Rome. The supremacy of Rome was established in the 2nd century BCE when it finally crushed Carthage, its only major rival in the Mediterranean world. This was the fateful outcome of the 2 Punic Wars, which resulted in Rome becoming the superpower of the Western world. Although ample documentation exists about the Roman Republic in the 1st century BCE, it is largely written by and about powerful men such as Julius Caesar and Cicero, scions of aristocrats or of equities, knights who were mostly traders and businessmen. Another significant group was that of the legionnaires who fought Rome's wars of conquest, about whom there are written accounts, including Caesar's records of his victorious campaigns in Gaul and Helvetia. The comparatively sparse information that is available about the lives of ordinary people, the plebeians, indicates that most of them inhabited the city-state itself, eking out their lives in narrow, treacherous streets with no public sanitation, street lighting, or police force to keep order. Even more miserable was the existence of the slaves, which led them to rebel from time to time, the most famous uprising being led by Spartacus, the Thracian slave and gladiator. He was a revolutionary and, according to some accounts, a principled man who briefly posed a challenge to the might of Rome. This rebellion was finally put down by Crassus in 71 BCE. As conditions of the city-state were hazardous, even prosperous Romans did not travel about in it after dark for fear of attack. The only collection of the night of the latter being sold by the Senate, Rome's governing body, to the highest bidder. The infamous Roman orgies that have attracted so much attention were, at that time, largely confined to the youth of wealthy aristocratic families, the latter of whom numbered around 20. It was those families who wielded the power in Rome and owned most of its wealth, as change was next to impossible in the Roman system of governance, with too many checks and balances in place. One result of this stasis was an acute shortage of land in Rome itself, as well as the hinterland, due to the accumulation of land in the hands of the same rich and powerful aristocratic families. This, along with serious difficulties arising from the outbreak of frequent hostilities between powerful strongmen at the head of the legions, problems associated with dire living conditions, the periodic influx of refugees, and gang violence, led to the Republic being constantly endangered by internal unrest. Externally, it was under threat from frequent uprisings by indigenous populations in its vast empire and to piracy on the high seas. The spirit of the times of the first century BCE, Rome, reverberates tellingly with that of the modern world. Okay, um, so may you live in interesting times, and you better know your history or you
Yeah.
will relive it.
Well, and
Uh,
that whole is the even prosperous Romans did not travel about in the dark. Um, that these orgies, which are so, Bacchus, Dionysus, as if that's the only thing. They're either in the Senate or they're either in politics voting or they're over having an orgy. I mean, it's, and that's not really the whole of it, but it's so sensationalized and so publicized as if that's a primary thing. But it's like now when someone starts to virtue signal victim crying out and, oh my God, I was insulted. And it's like, well, don't take it so personally. I mean, be stronger, be sovereign. That the fact that only 20 aristocratic families, I didn't realize how small of a fraction of the proportion of the whole that orgy phenomenon was until this paragraph, which then reminds me of the Fool card in the tarot. As the Fool leaves on the journey, the aristocratic head starts to bubble up to the top. They leave the heart, they leave the gut, and it's too much hedonism of only pleasure up high, up here. And as the Fool comes back, I mean, that speaks the lightning bolt of truth. The whole head is swollen, and it's like a seed pod that just bursts. So it's interesting the imbalance quality of not having that gut, the not knowing, the Fool,
yeah,
where the aristocratic minority, as it would be, and they're in charge and in control, but they're also a minority, naturally get imbalanced because they're sticking to their minority as ruling the whole.
right. And so proportionally, things haven't changed much because now,
Right.
around the year 2000, there were, let's say, 650 billionaires in the world. And today there's about 2,500. So in 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
we've made 2,500 aristocratic families who have billions of dollars. That's thousands of millions of dollars.
Right.
And they can do what they jolly well please, although, um, all these little green electrons that they have in their bank account can't get them very much. You can only buy so many Mercedes. And, um, I know a man who had about 50 red sports cars. Every kind of red sports car you could possibly own, he
Mm-hmm.
had. And he would buy it and he would drive it on about a 2 mile ride on a superhighway near his home, and then he would put it in his garage. And so all that metal was just nothing, really. I mean, where was that going? You know, you can only get so much. And so then maybe you can buy immortality. I mean, as the Carnegies and the Mellons and the Vanderbilts and the Roosevelts did, they um, they bought immortality by being philanthropists and building buildings. So even my little college at upstate New York has a Carnegie Hall, which is a dormitory.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, you know, enough is too much. Too much is too much. And, little green electrons don't do much for you after a while. Um, and
When
that,
you get down to breath itself is prayer, and breath itself is prayer enough that, I mean, I know moving here, the truck never showed up. So I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure that my third of the truck on someone else's two-thirds of the truck, it's probably sitting in there. The more I think about it, it's probably sitting in their basement, and they're unfamiliar boxes, so they'll never be opened. I mean,
Well, or people liked what you owned at that time because my father carried his Navy sword, which was given to him by his grandfather when he graduated from the Naval Academy. He physically carried it to every duty station we went to in the Navy. He
mm,
moved it himself. But the last, and this includes going to Japan and back, but when he retired from the Navy, he shipped it and he never got it back. Okay.
uh, yeah,
And I had a couple of things. I had a old musket, musket with a front loader type thing, single shot musket. And I had
with the pack and the
yeah,
rock.
and I had a beautiful big safe that I had gotten out of a bank at one point. I had bought when it was excessed, and it was in my garage for years, and had fancy twisting dial on it and the whole smash, but it was it never made it out of storage, so probably never made it into storage is what I guess.
That's a
The
point. That's interesting, the correspondence here, because the point you made of, maybe those people liked what I had. Maybe they opened the boxes. Maybe they, oh, what's this? Who had the memorabilia? How did we get this?
mhm,
A lot of the stuff had my name on it, so they would have known. Um,
yeah,
but it maybe, it's, oh, they liked it more than I did in a way. So it moved on. But I remember 3 months in when I realized, um, they said, well, you're going to have to start paying storage fees because your 3 months of free storage you negotiated um, has expired. And I said, no, it hasn't. Um, Storage fees won't start until you can tell me where it is. I
yeah,
mean, the contract has no fact to have placement of
right.
origin and to enceive it to inception. And of course, they didn't quibble, but I realized after I got off the phone that day that I had zero emotional anything. It was just, oh, that happened. Like I'm almost like, what's the weather? Who am I going to call next? Do I want a cup of coffee? I mean, it was just so non that I
Yeah.
went, oh, I I I had my snake skin shedded, the molting, delegated to somebody else without even trying. So
Yeah.
when, oh, I'm all fresh and new and clean, and I'm flying without as much baggage, literally. And um, it was honestly, it was a really nice realization to just in that moment go, all right, I'm going to go to lunch. I mean, that's about as much as it happened. And that I think never would have happened before, because anytime, 24 hours, even in the past from then, I wouldn't have arrived here and I would have forensically searched through and I'm going to figure this out,
Mhm.
and I just didn't have that anymore. I didn't have a need to show pony prove anything. And
Yeah.
that was quite an interesting little milestone in the moment.
Well, last night we watched a film called Maria, which is about Maria Callas,
Mm.
and it's quite an interesting movie with Maria Callas played by Angelina Jolie, who did a magnificent job on this movie. But there's one scene in it where Maria Callas is lying in bed, and it's this huge, ornate bed that towers like over her, and it has gold and fancy bed covers and all sorts of things. And then she gets out of bed, and you know she more or less does the same things all of us do when we get up in the morning. And so, um, maybe all that ornamentation made her feel good, but at the same time, you can get along on a cot. I lived on a cot in Vietnam for 9 months, and it was all right. I'm still here, so I guess it's okay. But anyway, that movie, Maria, with Angelina Jolie, is worth seeing. But, in part to compare your own life to the life of a wealthy woman who was the lover of Aristotle Onassis before Jackie Kennedy.
Mm.
And she was married to an Italian industrialist for a period of time, and who was, the kind of the diva of her time of the 50s mainly. And and then she had some problems and finally died of something. We don't know what exactly, either a heart attack or a drug overdose or maybe both. But anyway,
Well, I like that part about, you lived on the cot for 9 months in Vietnam, and you're still here. You're still fine. And there's the whole don't waste trouble, engage the trouble. And then actually, once you do, I kind of, if there's not a whole lot of some trouble somewhere, I'm like, well, I'm in the wrong spot. But it doesn't have to be troublesome. So there's the resistance and the compression that I think consolidates things for people.
yeah.
Um,
Okay, so here's the next section to read on here. Seeing if we can get to the end of this, because part three is Jung's quest for his soul. So this is Cicero. The heading is Cicero. Politically, men from the aforementioned patrician families held the power in Republican Rome by virtue of their membership in the Senate. From time to time, however, an unusually brilliant outsider rose to the ranks of the Senate, and one such outstanding figure was the son of an equite, equite, which is well, Equuite, Marcus Tullius Cicero, quote, the country boy, unquote, an origin he shares with Jung. While Cicero was still in his 20s, he had made his name as an exceptionally gifted lawyer and orator. From that vantage point, he went on to become a senator and eventually one of the two consuls who held power for a year. The custom of having two consuls elected annually was a key component of the checks and balances that kept any one individual from amassing too much power and aspiring to be king of Rome. Throughout his life, Cicero was identified with the overarching priority of reason and with championing the ideals espoused by the Republic, namely justice, good faith, harmony, discipline, prudence, and frugality, among others. His book, quote, on law, unquote, um, inspired by Plato's states, quote, law is the highest reason implanted in nature, which commands what ought to be done, whose natural function is to command right conduct and forbid wrongdoing, unquote. In summary, its summary its summary reads as follows, quote, virtue is reason completely developed. The law of the Father is encapsulated in the myth associated with Cicero's natal sign of Capricorn, the sign ruled by the principle of the disciplinarian father. His shadow side was that he was vainglorious, leaving him vulnerable to the machinations of the trickster, which led to his downfall. Despite these human failings, Cicero's reputation has come down through history as a wise counselor and inspiration to such diverse luminaries as Augustine, Queen Elizabeth I, Hume, and Voltaire. Viewed in this light, Cicero bears a resemblance to the figure of Philemon in the Red Book, who features as an archetypal wise old man and guide to Jung. Okay, that's Cicero comments.
Yeah, where's just the just this one line. But law is the highest reason implanted in nature, which commands what ought to be done, etc., etc. Virtue is reason completely developed. That's a really wonderfully loaded statement. And virtue is reason completely developed means the intuition, the gut, the heart, they're all in the gas tank. Don't need words. Your action will express the virtuous intent, as it were, from the fuel, because completely developed would be more than the whole self, would be you are part of nature and you are acting in harmony with nature is virtue, not the capital R Greek reason only, where if P then Q, if A and B, if and only if K then X. I mean, the whole philosophy of logic piece, which is just algebra.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's all rationality, but we have to remember that everything is in an atom. Okay.
yeah,
Everything, and so whatever has been will be again, and we don't have to do anything to change that.
yeah, I
However, we can be in mourning, okay? When
yeah.
things change, we can mourn what is lost, but we can't change the fact that the trickster emerges from the atom and is there. It's an archetypal figure, and
Yeah, and I think with that there's an attitude flip that I really appreciate, where we are not a drop in the ocean. We are an ocean and a drop. And that takes it to where you're not petitioning looking up and outside. for connection, you are yourself the connection, and you naturally can connect. And it's interesting to me that even Louis Kahn, the architect, he said, with what you just said, he said, what has always been, what is has always been, and what will be has always been. And I always add, and each birth is brilliant in its age. And I think that kind of pulls back, like you said, it's always been what goes around comes around. History repeating itself, rather than being good or bad, it's just cyclical. So it's like, what do
Yeah.
we do? What do we do with it?
Right. Okay. So let's read on because uh, this all is of the piece. The Catalan conspiracy. Cicero's greatest crisis arose when he collided with what the eminent astrologer and Jungian analyst Liz Green, in writing about Capricorn describes as the avenging lawgiver's strict and structured rules of life. This occurred at the time of the Catalan conspiracy, led by, quote, a louche patrician by the name of Lucius Sergius Catiline, unquote. At the height of Cicero's political power as consul in 62 BCE, a populist uprising to bring down the Senate and take over Rome was attempted by Catiline, an arch trickster. He and his fellow young aristocratic conspirators, had stirred up the populace, already discontented as the result of the recession occurring at that time, by spreading fake news that inflamed Rome with revolutionary fervor. Cicero managed, at great personal risk, to expose this revolution, at which point some of the conspirators were arrested and brought to the Senate. Catiline escaped, though he was later killed in battle, while the captive conspirators, with Cicero's consent, were condemned to death without trial. In this expeditious manner, he managed to defeat the greatest of all conspiracies with so little disturbance, trouble, and commotion. As a result, he was publicly declared the father of his country. Filled with human pride, Cicero endlessly boasted of this triumph in his writings and speeches, but the avenging law of the father, the central motif of his natal myth, was not to be escaped. In 58 BCE, a bill was passed in the Senate by one of his enemies, the patrician trickster Clodius, covertly supported by the powerful triumvirate of Caesar, Crassus, and Pompey. They stated that any public official who executed or had executed a citizen without due process of law should be exiled with the denial of the traditional symbols of hospitality, fire, and water. This was clearly aimed at Cicero, who, to save his life, had to shamefully take himself off to Thessalonica, where he came close to a complete breakdown before eventually being repatriated to Rome. Cicero's heroic achievement in saving Rome turned against him, presaged in the sign of Capricorn, as the opposing forces of the ambitious heroic sons clash with the stern lawgiver of the father. Morality and shame, law and lawlessness seem to comprise some of the polar opposites of Capricorn. There's a telling example in the 1970s of another individual who transgressed the law of the father, namely Richard Nixon. Like Cicero, was a lawyer, statesman, and fellow Capricorn. In today's world, the beneficent law-giving father, personified by Cicero, has been corrupted into the image of the strong leader, the trickster shadow side of the archetypal figure. In the end, for all their brilliance in worldly affairs, both Cicero and Nixon ended on the wrong side of history. In the case of the former, it was due to his conservative attachment to tradition, another characteristic of Capricorn. This may be seen in his undying loyalty to the idea of the republic, but a republic that was a corrupt version of its traditional ideals, while Caesar, with the pitiless insight of genius, understood that the Constitution, with its endless checks and balances, prevented effective government. The Roman Republic mirrors what is happening in the great power of today's world, echoing Jung's profound insight of the god growing old and becoming shadow. Wow.
Yeah, that's about the only word I have there too.
Yeah, and I have a marginal note in here from when I first read this years ago. Who will be Cicero? Yeah.
Well, and I love the growing old and becoming shadow, because it circumvents the transformation, and what is now casting the shadow, who is Cicero? And so who is Cicero for 200? It's like
Somebody has to tell us on the YouTube chat, what is Donald Trump's birth sign and what is Elon Musk's birth sign? I would love to know. Okay.
I don't know that.
Well, someone will look it up for us, I hope. Just put it into Google. Moving on.
Get their moon sign too, if you would, please, because that's more important.
Okay.
What does
the moon sign mean?
Well, to me, the moon sign to me is more important because your birth sign is immutable. But the moon is a photographic astrological snapshot of something that's very, very, very mobile. The moon, moving through signs every 2.5 days and kind of thing. And so what's interesting is I would call that the elusive actual identity, because what happens is it's going to be the further degree of inside of your sun sign. So I would look at the not dualistic, the both and motivator. For identity, I find, for example, I'm Sagittarius and I have a Capricorn moon conjunct ascendant kind of thing. Well, what's interesting is people say, well, ascendant's important, moon's important, sun not so much. Well, yeah, I can pull things out of nowhere, Sag, but the reality is I'm a lot more Capricorn, where it's even stability and intensity kind of thing. And I think that the piece of that is the more I can embrace my Sagittarius, maybe the more fun I'll have. But at the same time, it how much at my own expense. So it's interesting. So that I think then saying that too, then once you get the moon handled, then head back to the sun to look at the identity things and how they're colored. Because I think what happens is by themselves, they're each relatively inert. Like a photograph has a secret memory. It's a freeze frame. You don't know what happened before, even during or after. This is just a picture. So perspective versus perception, I think, is important. So I think there's a piece there where what do I think it is, perception, versus what is it, perspective, which I find the moon sign always gives me a little more of an inroad to open up how the sign is actually functioning.
Right. Okay, so Aristotle in the bottle says Trump is a Gemini.
Ultimate communicator, very Mercury,
Yeah.
Trismegistus, as it were. And did he get his moon sign?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
And just for the record, if people are looking these things up, I'm a Libra and have always recognized that, but I don't know anything about the moon sign. So my birthday is October 5th, 1946, if somebody wants to find a moon sign. Okay.
Actually, I think I have yours in my astro.com database.
Okay, so Roberta Harvey says, just here bringing up moon sign. I have a Libra moon. Apparently, ascendant is more that what we become as we get older. Cherie says, I was listening to Global Peace for Justice in Mexico with its former president. Uh, and Roberta says, greetings from Portugal. Well, welcome, Roberta. I remember you were in Portugal. Um, okay, so we have, I think, we have 2.5 more pages and then a conclusion in this essay. So let's see if we can get through it. Part 3, Jung's quest for his soul. Leo, the astrological sign depicted by the lion, one of the mother's accompanying beasts, stands for the fiery, instinctual side of anyone born under it. Akin to Capricorn, the symbolism of Leo circles around the theme of the hero and his father, but here it is the hero's quest for his spiritual father. At the time of another great crisis in Cicero's life, brought about by the death of his beloved only daughter, Tullia, uh, in childbirth, he turned to the study of the nature of the gods, the noblest of the studies for the human mind to grasp. In typical Ciceronian mode, he explored this through an imaginary reasoned Socratic debate between the Greek philosophies of Stoics, Epicureans, and Peripatetics. Jung, in his turn, at the time of great personal and collective crisis, turned to the same theme in the Red Book, though he did this through steeping himself in the irrational realm of the collective unconscious. My interest in astrology was piqued through acquaintance with Liz Green, from whom I gained some insight into its psychological acuity. As Jung states, I do not hesitate to take the synchronistic phenomena that underline astrology seriously, just as there is an eminently psychological reason for the existence of alchemy, so too in the case of astrology. The dismissal of alchemy and astrology as irrational in today's world exists alongside a lack of awareness of its own irrationality driven by the blind will. The year 1914 was the ominous harbinger of a new consciousness in the West, underwritten by increased reliance on science and technology. Jung knowingly chose this same year to transcribe his own odyssey into the Red Book, traveling in strange lands where he encountered myriad mythical figures. As alluded to in part 1, he resorted to being a trickster as the only possible way of freeing himself from identification with the blonde hero. In view of this, it seems ironic that Jung is critical of the cunning Odysseus in the following statement. Quote, he went astray when he played his trick at Troy, unquote. Uh, as is well known, Odysseus's trick is creating the Trojan horse led to the end of the 10-year grim-visaged Trojan War, after which he embarked on his Odyssey. Jung's inner voyage of discovery was likewise set against the backdrop of another epic-changing war. Homer's Odyssey is one of the various myths that appear in the Red Book, though the leitmotif of the book is to be found in the myth that governs Jung's natal sign of Leo, namely the quest for the Grail. This features overtly in the text as a play wherein Jung is both audience and at the same time is identified with the characters. This telling depiction of the ambiguity inherent in mythology, in being both personally relevant and at the same time impersonal in content, is illustrated by the following quotations. Quote, "How closely Klingsor resembles me," unquote. "The audience is enraptured and recognizes itself in Parsifal. He is I," unquote. The lion skin, quote, "The lion skin of Hercules adorns his shoulders and he holds the club in his hand," unquote. Quote, "I rise and become one with myself," unquote. The quest for the Grail, undertaken unwittingly by Parsifal, is there from the beginning of the Red Book and expressed as Jung's search for his soul. Richard Wagner's opera Parsifal is the supreme depiction of Celtic legends that, in medieval times, melded with Christianity as the myth of the quest for the Grail, featured in Arthurian legend. Both Wagner and Jung were transformed through reading the philosophy of Schopenhauer, particularly the latter's assertion that the outer world of presentation is illusory, or, in Jung's language, the spirit of this time. Instead, it is the blind will and the spirit of the depths that is irrational, prime mover in life. Wagner's debt to Schopenhauer lasted until his death and is expressed thus, quote, "How can I thank him enough?" unquote. Parsifal was the last opera of Wagner's oeuvre, some of the principal themes of which are summarized here from an account in Brian McGee's erudite book, Wagner and Philosophy. The Order of the Knights of the Grail, swearing lifelong chastity, are guardians of the most numinous of objects, namely the chalice that Christ drank from at the Last Supper and the spear that pierced Christ's side on the cross. The knights regularly reenact the ritual of the Last Supper. Another night, Klingsor, unable to control his sexuality, castrates himself and is not admitted to the order. He transforms into a magician and gains possession of the spear, which he takes to his castle set in a magical garden. This loss results in the ritual becoming a Jungian enactment. Amfortas, king of the knights, sets forth to recover the spear, but succumbs to the erotic temptress Kundry, during which Amfortas is wounded with the spear by Klingsor. Kundry, the feminine figure in the story, is the lowly servitor of the order, as well as the temptress in the power of Klingsor. Parsifal is the pure fool, killing birds with his bow and arrow, but stumbles into the order and is permitted to stay by its wisest knight, Gurnemanz. But Parsifal never develops, remaining childishly unaware, so that he is banished from the order. Thenceforth, he has many encounters with monsters and giants before bumbling into Klingsor's domain, slaying many of his knights, and finally recovering the spear after resisting the seduction attempts of Kundry. Although Parsifal's sexuality is finally aroused, he manages to overcome its power, Schopenhauer's will, through acceding to the competing power of compassion for the suffering of Amfortas. On Good Friday, when the world is renewed through repentance and transformation, Parsifal baptizes Kundry, releasing her from Klingsor's curse and heals Amfortas's wound with the recovered spear. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a moment. We have still the conclusion to go. Go ahead.
I think what's interesting here is it's kind of an arabesque of circles.
Yeah.
Action, reaction, response, action, reaction, response. And in a sense, you have these little mini tragedies in the whole work of it. That light and dark and light and dark. It's so I kind of felt like as you were reading, there was this back and forth light and dark fractal dance going on with, which in a sense is a very trickstered way to tell a story. Trying to basically it's like rodeo, trying to throw you off the horse, throw you off the bull.
Yeah. Okay.
Your birthday again?
October 5, 1946. Okay, Richard says the fight for good against evil never stops. If Jung had just realized Jesus gave us all we need in the Eucharist, it is the true secret of the alchemy.
And were you born in Massachusetts?
No, I was born in Mississippi.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't even touch that, Richard. There's a lot tied up in what you said, and Jesus changed the world, no doubt about that. We're still fighting after 2,000 years, though. Okay, Cherie says, Saddam Hussein had my birthday. Please don't blame me for that. Wow. Aristotle.
I wouldn't worry about that too, because twins who are born seconds apart, even if they came out at the same time somehow,
yeah.
Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
I've done people where they had almost the exact same chart, and they were nowhere near personality-wise each other.
Aristotle asks, has anyone seen the legendary film Holy Mountain by genius Alejandro Jodorowsky? Have you seen that?
I haven't.
I haven't seen it.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, Jodorowsky had a lot of good insights, but they're not the topic for today. Richard says, the Orthodox or Catholic host gives us eternal life. It is the Grail, the true mana. It gives life to the soul and body. Well, I think the Grail is the human psyche, more likely. And
yeah, it's you. I mean,
it's you.
Don't go out looking for something that you already have. And I think the Grail legend is a trick question from the beginning. I mean, it's basically, I think the question is, have you made shame walk the plank? And if so, you're whole. And then you don't care about searching for it, you live it. So I think there's searching for the Grail is up to age 42. And then after age 42, you're no longer searching for the Grail, you're fully living. Potentially. I mean, that's the same place Jung's made the switch. So yeah, I think you're right. The psyche, the whole self embedded in nature in context is the Grail.
Yeah.
So I'd say nature is the vessel, and then we are each what fills the Grail vessel.
Yeah. Okay.
I would
therefore it's Mother Nature, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So just shift focus and redirect scale, and you still, well, there's a rhyme. Shift focus and redirect scale, and you're still at the Grail.
So Aristotle says, oh my God, the movie is insane. it sums up alchemy in a dramatic way. Okay, no doubt. Um, Richard, he came on to his own, and his own wouldn't recognize him in their disbelief that their savior was just an ordinary carpenter. Um, yeah, a lot there. So,
So do you happen
Roberta,
to know approximately what time, day or night, you were born?
I was born at 9:05 in the morning.
Okay.
So Roberta says she emailed me in December with her address. I'm wondering, I don't recall seeing it at all, Roberta, so please email me again and I will get back to that because I thought I had done what I can do on Christmas, but Christmas keeps coming back on me. But nonetheless, please send me your email, your address again, and I'll make another stab at it. Okay, Cherie, Mother Nature. Aristotle. Also, Manly P. Hall is great in speaking about alchemy. It's like Jung, but with newer and easier language. Um, Richard, we are the true living temples of God in our bodies. Amen to that. Roberta, Shri Mother Nature. Okay. Um, all right, let's read the conclusion of this, and then we'll see where we go from there. Okay, so conclusion. Parsifal and the Red Book overlap each other with the overarching theme of the quest for the Grail, resonating with Jung's quest for his soul. The figures represented in Parsifal recur many times in the Red Book. For example, the innocence of the pure fool, divine child, the ambiguity of the anima figure, Kundry Salome, as both seducer and destroyer and loving, nurturing mother, the fear that Salome is after his head, a several head standing also for castration, a severed head, standing also for castration, linking it to Klingsor's castration, some complementarity between the dyad Elijah and Salome and the dyad Klingsor Kundry. The trickster magician Klingsor's magic garden, with its links to the Garden of Eden, the settling of humankind's downfall that includes the serpent, and with the Garden of Gethsemane, the setting of humanity's redemption. Philemon, as the monopersonality and Jung's inner guide, combines characteristics from both Gurnemanz and the wise magician, a transformation of the evil Klingsor. Um, Good Friday, the time of redemption of all souls, the Last Supper, Jung's Christ-like hanging from the cross, and the key notions of fulfillment and redemption expressed in Jung's term individuation that comes about through feeling, not by intellectual means, which mirrors Parsifal's compassion for Amfortas, the latter bearing some resemblance to the wounded Izdubar referenced in part one. Toward the latter part of the Red Book, the following words from Jung seem a fitting conclusion to this piece. Quote, a living God fills us with reeling chaos that sweeps away the self into the boundless, into dissolution. Unquote. With extraordinary prescience, the Red Book depicts the blind will in the depths of the collective unconscious that is now unleashed into cyberspace. In linking this to Jung's quotation, it seems apposite to suggests that the Red Book represents a key text from which to explore the mysteries of God's existence in cyberspace.
There's a nod to quantum there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Okay. I think one thing that I want to emphasize here that is that there's always churn. In other words, the reason we keep reliving history is because new human beings are coming along every time, every day, and older, experienced, wisdom-filled elders are dying away. And so the new human beings have to learn the wisdom that the older ones knew by personal experiment kind of thing. And Jung's Red Book, as he describes it, is his greatest experiment on himself. He was trying to figure out what's it all about. I mean, there was a movie back in the 60s called Alfie, and the song goes, "What's it all about, Alfie? What's it all about? What's it all about?" And we come into the world and we live in this castle, which is our own life. And sometimes that castle has riches, and sometimes it's very difficult. And we come we come through that experience um, in different ways. I know our friend Art Patterson, who suffers from cerebral palsy, has had a very different life than most of us. And yet he still is attracted to this work, and is actually our first uh, guest every week on this program, for which I'm very honored. And
It's great to have him here.
yeah, and so it's great that you're here, Art. I really appreciate it. And um, and in many ways, Art is a very wise man and often makes valuable comments here on the YouTube channel. Um, and so, uh, to an extent, we all have the same issue. We're all born into, let's say, a flawed human body one way or another. We all have our problems. I mean, I may seem to be old, but otherwise okay. But the fact is, um, I'm, I have 3 joint replacements in my legs, so I'm permanently disabled. And I do my job walking around to school every day with a walker. And so if you see me doing my work uh, in the school, um, it's quite a vision with me driving around with my jalopy. But it works, and I just found that I was using a cane. I had been using a cane exclusively, and the result was that I was banging this shoulder straight through from the ground every step, and that was causing a lot of pain. And so the walker helps me not use the cane all the time and not have that impact on my shoulder.
Hmm.
It's gradually getting better. But we all have our flaws. That's the fact. And um, what so far what I see is that from the waist up I'm pretty okay, but from the waist down there's a lot of different troubles. And um, we all have these limitations one way or another, and So, as I was saying about the Maria movie, uh, it it's just a fact that yes, you can have a lot of beautiful things. You can own 50 red sports cars, but in the end, you're just another creature that eats and defecates, right?
Yeah. Well,
And thereby keeping your machine operating. And when the machine runs out, you're going to not be there anymore, um, except in your spirit. And so, how do you leave your spirit behind in a proper way? You have to decide. Um, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say the wisdom of the ages. One, the wisdom of the ages lives within. So there's that Sophia piece, Hokmah piece, where that's the generative, internal, feminine, creative, life-giving birth, inside quality. But what I always say with in terms of wisdom, inspect what you expect. See your blind spots, because the whole story to me of grandma's roast, do you really know why you're doing something, or just doing it compulsorily because you've been told to and you continue to? Because the story of grandma's roast is the grandson says, "Hey grandma, I know you still have many years to go, but I want to continue the tradition of doing the roast, and will you teach me?" She goes, "Sure, you just go try all by yourself this year, and I'll see where I need to start teaching you from." And so he goes in, and he walks in and he marinates the roast. He cuts the ends off the roast and he puts it back in and marinates it some more, and puts the roast in the oven, and he cooks it, and he takes it out to the table, and she takes a knife and fork and she tries the first bite, and she said, "This is the best roast I've ever tasted." It is. So we're going to have to learn together some more. But I have a question. Why'd you waste a pound of meat and cut the ends off the roast? He said, well, Grandma, you always do that. She goes, "Oh, that's just a bad habit. Back when my oven was too small." So, be careful if you just imitate blindly. If you're doing something that's actually not functionally part of, the system. So part of the
Yeah.
wisdom is seeing through waste or things that aren't currently contextually relevant.
Right. So Richard says he has a walker also. So, you we keep moving, we keep
Yep.
doing things, right? Um, and Cherie says Alan Watts met Carl Jung. I have no doubt about that. Okay, we have some time left, and one of my favorite people around is Ashok Beatty. And Ashok Beatty is a Jungian analyst. I think he lives in Wisconsin. And I suppose I could find his right up in the back of this book so we could read it. Let's see. Here it is. Okay, Ashok Beatty is an MD, is a Jungian psychoanalyst and board-certified psychiatrist. He is a member of the Royal College of Psychiatrists of Great Britain, a diplomate of psychological medicine at the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of England, a distinguished life fellow of the American Psychiatric Association. He is a clinical professor in psychiatry at the Medical College of Wisconsin in Milwaukee and a training analyst at the C.G. Jung Institute of Chicago. His publications include Crossing the Healing Zone, Awakening the Slumbering Goddess, The Latent Code of the Hindu, Goddess Archetypes, Retire Your Family Karma, Decode Your Family Pattern, and Path to the Soul. He is the liaison for the AAP for developing Jungian training programs in India, and leads the annual quote, a Jungian encounter with the soul of India, quote, unquote, study group to several centers in India under the auspices of the New York Jung Foundation. Webpage is pathtothesoul.com. And so anyway, he's quite a distinguished man. And one of the important things that he pointed out is that the actually, I'm not sure. I'm not recalling exactly. It's there's an Indian figure. I think it is Krishna. But anyway, Jung pointed out in the Red Book, and this is why this is significant. Uh, Jung pointed out in the Red Book, and I'm going to show it to you because I actually have the image here, which I can share with you. There is only two phrases that in the Red Book that were written in English, and these come from the Bhagavad Gita. And I'm going to show it to you because it's right next to the image of Philemon in the Red Book. I think it's page 123. Red Book images. I simply have to find the image. I have it here. Let's see. Just a moment. I'm looking for the correct image to share with you. I'm pretty sure I have it, but I don't seem to have indexed it properly. Yes, there it is. Got a little ahead of myself here. Okay. All right. So here's the image. It's page 154 of the folio version of the Red Book, and I will share this image for you now. And unfortunately, I cannot read it off the screen because it is too small. But I can read it out of the Bhagavad Gita, I think, if I can grab my Bhagavad Gita. But anyway, up here in the upper left corner of this image is the only place that Jung used English. And I'll come back in a moment. I'm just going to try to grab it. Sorry, that didn't work, but I might have a picture of it somewhere else.
I was looking to see if I had a higher res image that I could blow up too, but I
Yeah,
find that.
I own 3 copies of the Red Book, or I'm sorry, the Bhagavad Gita, but I don't seem to be able to lay my hands on one at the moment. They're probably upstairs.
Hold on 1 second. Okay. You know the page or this
It's
verse?
154 of the Red Book.
But on the Bhagavad Gita, which verse?
Yeah. Do you have?
Well, I have the Bhagavad Gita here rather than the red.
Oh, okay. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's chapter 4, verses 7 and 8, I think. It's about when iniquity emerges, I come.
Chapter 4, verse
7 and 8, I think.
Is it the 7? Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice,
Yeah.
O descendant of Bharara, a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself.
Right. Okay. So this is Krishna, the Indian god Krishna, who represents God, saying to the human Arjuna that whenever bad things emerge in society, I reappear. And so Ashok Bedi's, the reason I'm making a point of this is that apparently in Indian tradition, there have been 9 times when Krishna has manifested in physical form, and the 10th time is due. Okay, and it is Ashok Bedi's dictum that he thinks the next time Krishna appears, he will be female. Okay, and so we have several candidates for that who could emerge on both sides of the political spectrum. Obviously Kamala Harris was a candidate, but she didn't emerge. She didn't succeed. And so there are a few others. There's Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan and Elizabeth Cheney on the Republican side. And so there are other candidates who could emerge with great wisdom and guide us out of our very complicated, struggling time. And we'll see who that might be.
Well, and to read verse 8 also, to deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to reestablish the principles of religion, I myself appear, millennium after millennium.
Yeah. And that was a different version that you were reading?
No, that was verse 8, right after verse 7.
Okay, well, I guess it is verse 7 and
7.
8 then. Okay, could you read it again, please?
Yeah, why don't I read
Because
7,
the point is that Jung wrote these words in English in the original Red Book. It's the only English words in the original Red Book. Um, and so it's of significance. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll read verse 7 and then verse 8 so that we have them together. Whenever and verse 7, whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself. Verse 8, to deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to reestablish the principles of religion, I myself appear, millennium after millennium.
Right. I'm sure he says Krishna, the divine avatar, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So the Bhagavad Gita is an insight that Arjuna has. It occurs in a second. Okay. In other words, everything that's in the Bhagavad Gita occurs in a single second in the psyche of Arjuna. Okay. And in that insight and vision that Arjuna had uh, more than 5,000 years ago, um, his chariot driver is Krishna, and he's meaning his self is his chariot driver, right?
Right.
And
Well, there's a Grail myth right there, the
sure.
container contained.
And so he had this insight, and the insight is that he has opposing forces. He was about to enter a battle, and there are opposing forces on each side of him, and on both sides there are his kinsmen. Okay, and he says to himself, what do I do now? And the I think the final advice is, forge ahead. If you kill your kinsman, I'll give you more, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so while I'm not sanguine about our times, the reality is that uh, inequity can't go on. And I think that's the message from Casement as well, that ultimately these things resolve.
Yes,
And
instead of equality, there's an quality of equanimity, the
yeah,
balance and the harmony, which doesn't mean equal, it means equally valuable. So I always refer to equanimity as educated symmetry, meaning if there's an axis and there's a circle on one side and a square on the other side, there's balance. And they're both equally valuable because in context, that is the whole perspective.
yeah,
Not I need a circle on one side and a circle on the other side. That's just tribalism. So it's interesting to me, dignity in difference, in difference, not indifference, but where we learn from each other. I mean, ethnography, through the person's eyes you're studying, not through your eyes. So, in a sense, not English colonialism. Come in, try to interpret all this stuff, and like you said, in India, the hundreds of years of the Raj, and people didn't even know, and
yeah, that's
it had
right.
no effect whatsoever. It's just imperial.
Right. Yeah, I'll just repeat that story in a minute. But here in the Red Book, page 154, this is a photo from the actual Red Book. Uh, what's written in the marginal note is Jung's only entry of English in this book. And it's these two paragraphs from the Bhagavad Gita. And so, in effect, he is equating himself, he's equating Philemon with Krishna as, the wisdom part of himself. And he's actually in this picture down at Philemon's feet. This is Jung, and he's kneeling before his self, which is Philemon. And so, when things go bad, and for Jung, at the time of the Red Book, things were going pretty damn bad. Okay, the Germans were after him. They wanted to execute him, and um, and the First and Second World War emerged, and so life was not good at the time that Jung lived, and at the time the Red Book was written,
Hmm.
and yet he consoled himself with those two verses of the Bhagavad Gita. And so, if you don't know the Bhagavad Gita, um, Kushbu Kantari and I read it in both. I read it in three versions, and Kushbu read it in Sanskrit, and we read the entire Bhagavad Gita. And you can find our readings on this YouTube channel, and you can just listen to it and hear it. You'll hear three versions because there's a poetic version, there's a very matter-of-fact version by less sorry, I'm having a senior moment here.
I can't remember his last name either. It's kind of like oh God, Parks or Sparks for Rumi, and then what's his last name?
Just a moment. I've got it. I think I can get it here. Les Morgan.
Morgan. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Les Morgan is the American authority on the Bhagavad Gita right now, because he's sliced and diced it in every possible way. The woman who is now the president of Middlebury College, and her name also escapes me at the moment, but I haven't looked at the Bhagavad Gita in a while, as you can see.
She jumped in my mind was Coleman Barks for Rumi, but that's off topic. So
yeah, she wrote the poetic version, and then there's another version that's a very workmanlike basic version for the rest. It's the Bhagavad Gita for dummies, I think, is the best way to describe it. Nice. So those are the three versions I read, and Kushbu read it in the original in Sanskrit, and so it's worth you taking a look at. I would say is what I would say about that. And
translation, it's always important to find the resonant one that, regardless of the linguistics, has the same conceptual tenor as the original. For example, Rainer Maria Rilke's The Panther. I mean, some of them translate word for word, and they're just boring, and they don't do any justice. And then you get the conceptual ones where you feel what he was saying. And I think that's important, because especially with poetry, translating poetry is one of the most difficult things to do, because if there's internal rhyme, it might be lost in another language.
Yeah.
And so you get these nuances that you in a sense have to have kind of a scholarship with the original language to read a translation in another language. Otherwise, it's a whole different animal. It's not even the same poem.
Right. And I was looking for my Bhagavad Gita, and I just realized I had it right in front of me. Yeah. This is a different version.
Yeah.
This is This is a version by Swami Tapasyananda. And
Okay, because I've got the A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Hmm.
so, yeah, so let me also go back to this one um, just for a moment. It's a different translation, and I'll go one verse back. And these various names that he pulls out are just epithets or names for Arjuna throughout the Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna calls Arjuna many different names during the course of the Bhagavad Gita, but he's actually referring to the same person because Krishna is the self, right, of this person. So, all right, so let me read this in this version. Though birthless and deathless, and the Lord of all beings as well, yet I, the eternal being, take birth by my inherent mysterious power, employing the pure or sattva aspect of my material nature. Whenever there is a decline of dharma and the ascendance of adharma, in other words, the decline of good and the ascendance of evil, O son of the Bharata faith, so that's one of the epithets, I manifest, incarnate myself in a body for the protection of good, for the destruction of the wicked, and for the establishment of dharma. I am born from age to age. And then it goes on, O Arjuna, he who thus understands the truth about my embodiment and my deeds, he, on the abandoning his present body, is not reborn. He attains me. Okay, so you
It's interesting
return.
there because from a translation standpoint, the one I have, millennium to a millennium, and then age to age. But an age of an epoch is 2,000 years. But then that age there, millennia to millennia, would be implied to be 1,000 years, which would be half of an age, which is interesting because then you get I'm in one and then midpoint towards the next. So in a sense, if I look at the one I have that's millennium to millennium, and you're like yours is age to age, it tells me that the numerical value of the number of years of the age is a millennium, which is half of an epoch, 2,000 years plus minus of the cycles of the earth. And it's interesting there because then I'm dealing with um, upcoming midpoints and previous transitions. You know, at the 1,000 year zero, I'm moving and I'm in the next, and
Yeah,
then 500 years later, divide again by two. I'm moving towards the next, but I'm still in the previous. And so the are you dragging the bags? You know, or are you actually in context in the present tense? So it's interesting to me because then the coming, as it would be, um, there with Krishna every 1,000 years, not every 2,000 years. And so what's interesting is how things change. And if we look back, you know, some of these amazing temples built around 1050, and then the Great Fire of London and 1066. All these different occurrences that indicate the passage, you know, and where you are in it. Just kind
yeah.
of interesting. I hadn't thought about that before, but just hearing yours age to age, and age is vague without any context, but then I put it in context with the translation I have of millennium to millennium, and it assigns a scalar specific numerical value.
Yeah.
Which is, that's kind of interesting.
Right. And by the way, if you put Ashok Bedi's name in the search engine on this YouTube channel, you will find our interview of Ashok Bedi. That is his name. And, you know, I think, I mean, Richard, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think we can agree that the description of God in the Bhagavad Gita really also sums up the description of what we call God in Christianity or in Judaism or whatever, the same thing. And so Arjuna asks the question or says, tell me again and again of thy divine powers and majesties, for I am ever eager to hear more and more of thy nectarine words. Okay, so Arjuna is asking God to tell him all about his glories. And it so happens that when I got interested in the Bhagavad Gita again after 50 years, and I purchased a copy, I purchased the poetic copy, which is published by Penguin Books. And as is my wont, when I get a new book, I'll open it to a page and begin reading. And it so happens that this is the passage that I opened to. So it was very meaningful to me. There were a lot of synchronicities around Kushbus of my reading of the Bhagavad Gita, but I'm not going to get into that.
Interesting with that passage, the passage there, the word choice of nectarine words is really curious to me because I would look at that as citrus honey, which would be ambrosia. And
yeah.
So again,
the translation that is ambrosia in another version, so that's right, and honey.
Kind of citrus honey, and so I think again, find multiple sources when you're looking at these things. If it's in a different language, because people are grasping at straws, one trying to accurately translate words, but translate thoughts, concepts, conceptual and contextual tenor of what's the soul of what was being said. So yeah, it's I think, nectarine, and I'm going, well, that's in the grocery store, but it's ambrosia, which is not in the grocery store.
Right. Okay. So let me read on here. So, O blessed, the blessed Lord said, behold, O best of the Kurus. Kuru is Arjuna's family. I shall declare unto you what my divine self-manifestations are, but I shall mention only the chief of them, for there is no end to their detail. O Arjuna, I am the self residing in the heart of every being. I am their beginning, their lifespan, and their end. Of the 12 Adityas, I am Vishnu. Among the luminaries, I am the radiant sun. Among the 7 Marats, I am Marichi. And of the Nakshatras, I am the moon. Of the Vedas, I am the Samaveda. Among the Devas, I am Indra. Of the senses, I am the mind. And in living beings, I am intelligence. Of the 11 Rudras, I am Sankara. Among the demigods and titans, I am Kubera. Of the 8 Vasus, I am Agni. Among mountains, I am the Mount Meru. Among the priests, know me to be the chief of them. Baspati, the priest of the Devas, O Arjuna. Among the warlords, I am Skanda. Among the water reservoirs, I am the ocean. Among the great sages, I am Brigu. Among utterances, I am the god of love, and among snakes, Vasuki. Among serpents, I am Ananta. Among water dwellers, I am Varuna. Among the mains, I am Aryama. And among the enforcers of law, I am Yama. Well, I'm not going to go on with this, but you get the idea. He's basically everything, right?
Yep. Well,
So,
it's interesting on the back of mine too. Henry David Thoreau says of the Bhagavad Gita, in the morning I bathe my intellect in the stupendous and cosmogonal philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, in comparison with which our modern world and its literature seem puny and trivial.
yeah, man. Okay. So having said all that, and having said that we can all learn something from the Bhagavad Gita, in my opinion, um, and this says nothing of the Son of God.
Well,
But
and that's
anyway,
interesting there too is why is it necessary to offshoot divine progeny? That's what I like about the Bhagavad Gita is it stays whole. It
yeah,
doesn't splinter into, I'm going to drop someone down to suffer. And in that sense, I find it to be more of the complete Holy Grail psyche, as it would be, that's both masculine and feminine. And in that sense, what's the figure and what's the ground? And
yeah,
neither has the gender. I mean, it can be either. But and it takes me to Kali, and she's got her foot on the other dude. Is it Shakti? And the thing is, he's completely still. And that is a perfect bracing for her high intensity energetics. So when she moves, she doesn't peel out. She doesn't lose any of her power. And that's why she's so strong. It's because she has his stillness as foundation. And so, again, these both and pieces where when you look at the figure, in that sense, Kali, part of her is amplified by he has no interference patterns. He's just foundation. And that helps her be more powerful. So I think in all of these, if we look at the both and, what are we seeing? What are we presented? And then in between, what do we not see?
right.
And
And there's a perfect encapsulation of that in the movie Out of Africa. Okay,
yes, that's a
where
yeah,
where Meryl Streep is making love with uh, Robert Redford, right? They're making love, and he says to her as they're making love, "Don't move." And there's a silence, and she says, "But I have to move." And he says, "Don't." That encapsulates everything
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Okay,
In a sense, they're having a timeless moment
yeah,
together. In the silence, that's total privacy.
yeah. Okay, so right. Aristotle claims that Jung never came across Persian oldest Avestas, the Gathas. It's pure treasure. I'm sure that that is true, but I'm not sure it's true that he never came across them. Okay, I think we might find that he did. And mind you, um, there are still 100,000 letters of C.G. Jung that have not been translated. And people are working on these matters, but we still don't know everything about Carl Jung because there's a lot that has not been translated. And the same is true of the 84,000 teachings of the Buddha. Okay, we only know about 5% of what the Buddha ever said. Okay, the rest of it is in Sanskrit and in Tibetan Buddhism, in Tibetan. And there are 84,000 teachings of the Buddha. They are available in Sanskrit and Tibetan Sanskrit. But there's a project to translate them all, and it's called 84,000. My wife used to work for that group at one point, but in any case, a lot of things we don't know still.
Mhm.
And So I'm going to read the first section of the Ashok Beatty article, and it's before Philemon is introduced. But the title of his article is Jung's Red Book, A Compensatory Image of Our Contemporary Culture, a Hindu Perspective by Ashok Beatty. Whenever the consciousness of an individual is out of balance, the self incarnates in a compensatory dream to restore the balance. When the consciousness of a culture or an era is out of balance, artists, writers, and shamans carry the self of the collective to incarnate in word or image a compensatory perspective. Goethe's Faust and Jung's Red Book are two recent examples of a magnum opus where the self of the collective was incarnated via the active imagination of these creative individuals. To guide the telos of our matrix, the prescription of the Red Book as a GPS for our times will be amplified from a Hindu perspective. This essay is a hermeneutic reflection on Jung's Red Book. Now, one thing I want to point back to is that when I'm doing my paintings in um, in the mornings at 6 a.m., my paintings are my way of rebalancing my psyche. They compensate me, and I do them for myself. Okay, I have no particular aspiration that my paintings will be anything great or anybody will care much about them. But for me, I do it every day as a spiritual practice, and it is to rebalance myself. And I can actually feel it. In my case, I'm able to actually feel the rebalancing happening. All right, so Jung's Red Book. Hmm?
Um, the right here too, I appreciate that he sets this up this way, but it seems to be half the story because the compensatory image would be compensating. It's not in balance, and so there's a piece missing. So I would ask here, or I would say that then when it is in balance, not when it's only out of balance. Zen Koan number 82 applies. Feel the consciousness of each person as your own consciousness. So, leaving aside concern for self, become each being. And then I wrote in the margin compassion. And I think there's a difference between compensatory and compassion that I think tells a bigger story here.
Yeah, and this is what the Robert Redford character in Out of Africa was
Yeah.
saying. Don't
Yes.
move,
Don't move.
but I have to move. Don't.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Going on. Jung's Red Book, A Personal Odyssey or a Collective Vision, question mark. To truly grasp the gifts of Jung's Red Book, the reader needs to get the ego out of the way to engage it. The first demand any work, quote, the first demand any work of art makes upon us is surrender. Look, listen, receive. Get yourself out of the way. There's no good asking first whether the work before you deserves such a surrender, for until you have surrendered, you cannot possibly find out. Jung comments that there are two types of works of art, psychological and visionary. Quote, the psychological mode works with materials drawn from man's conscious life, with crucial experiences, powerful emotions, suffering, passion, the stuff of human fate in general. All this is assimilated by the psyche of the poet, raised from commonplace to the level of poetic experience. That is why I call this mode of creation psychological. It remains within the limits of the psychologically intelligible. The gulf that separates the first from the second part of Faust marks the difference between the psychological and the visionary modes of artistic creation. Here, everything is reversed. The experience that furnished the material for the artistic expression is no longer familiar. It is something strange that derives from the inner land of man's mind, if it had emerged from the abyss of pre-human ages, or from a superhuman world which surpasses man's understanding, and to which his weakness he may easily succumb. The very enormity of experience gives its value and its shattering impact. Sublime, pregnant with meaning, yet chilling the blood with its strangeness. It arises from timeless depths, glamorous, demonic, and grotesque. It bursts asunder out of human standards of value and aesthetic form, a tarrying tangle of eternal chaos. On the other hand, it can be a revelation of beauty which we can never put into words. But the primordial experiences run from top to bottom the curtain upon which is painting the picture of an ordered world, and allow a glimpse into the unfathomable abyss at this uh, at this of the unborn and of things yet to be. The creator of this kind of art is not only one who is in touch with the night side of life. Prophets and seers are nourished by it too, unquote. Both the part two of Goethe's Faust and Jung's Red Book fall into this category of visionary art. These are archetypal compensations for the lopsided attitudes of their times and our times. Goethe's Faust and Jung's Red Book are compensatory to the heroic and warrior-like attitudes of our times, particularly the contemporary West. Let us explore the visionary dimension of Jung's Red Book and its compensatory prescriptions for the ills of our times. Your comment there?
Yeah, the master hits the hard target to see. The genius hits the target that no one else knows about.
Yeah.
Between visionary and psychological, between psychological and visionary. I mean, the psychological is more mastery, the visionary is more genius. But they work together. I mean, if you have the genius part, then all the masters are in the audience, and if you have the masters up there, the geniuses are on looking, or ignoring, depending.
Yeah. I'm gonna sort of close this session with peering into my vision of America, which was, well, I'm gonna wait a minute. I'm gonna see. Okay, so this was a vision, literally a vision that I had on January the 19th, 2024. And I worked on this vision for a year. And I made 25 studies for this piece before I completed it. I worked on those simultaneously. I put 77 and a half hours into this particular painting, which is 40 inches wide and 25 and a half inches tall. But in order to accomplish this, I also did 25 other paintings, is what I'm saying. And I don't know, for the ones that are 18 by 24, they took about a month. Um, and then there were some much smaller ones that took about a week. The reason you're seeing Chinese there is that I uploaded this on Xiaohongshu, which is that's what this says. It says Xiaohongshu, which is the Red Book, uh, uh, and um, and that's the small book of Mao Zedong, and of course, so this is China's answer to TikTok, which I started to use when TikTok was shut down. And so they put something something here. It says my water shall, and I don't know. I get this must mean painting or something. My little painting. That was a translation that was put onto this image that I put on this TikTok thing. But I mean, here you can see. I mean, I literally just did it. Okay, I didn't. Um, I wasn't trying to paint a pretty picture of something that's in the physical world. I was I was inspired by this vision I had. And this piece is called Vision of America, by the way, number one. It's Vision of America, number one. And and so it took until about January 10th of this year to complete this. Um, so when we're talking about that kind of art, psychological art instead of pictorial art, um, that's what we're talking about. In my view, I don't know about anybody else's view, but that's my view. Comments, Jordan?
No, I think it's interesting about it's not a pretty picture. I mean, it's not, the intent is not to make a pretty picture, and that doesn't say it won't ever be one. But I think what happens is you're experientially making an expressionist process statement where the video of it happening, to me, is not important. It's the gold nugget that you pull out of the gold pan at the end. So
Yeah,
you're not reasoning with the black iron oxide in there. You toss that all back to the river, but the process is required to get there. This, shaking of the gold pan, but you don't reason with every little grain. You
yeah.
look for the granites and the rubies and the turquoise and the gold, and the other stuff's going to be tossed back.
Right. Okay, so Aristotle says I do abstract pour paints. Well, yeah, one of my favorite artists is Jackson Pollock, and because he does get through to the unconscious. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Richard says the picture of Dorian Gray is coming to its own today as America is coming into extreme pride. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm mourning the America that I served 23 years in the Marine Corps to defend, and I'm mourning a lot of things that have been lost in the last couple of weeks. And so this is a fashion statement. I'm going to be wearing black until I don't feel like I'm mourning any longer. And that's going to be a while. So yesterday I bought 4 shirts like this, exactly the same. And I ordered a couple pairs of trousers from Land's End, who's the only people that offer good trousers anymore, as far as I can tell, for chinos. And I'll be wearing that to school every day, and I'll be wearing that on this YouTube channel for the foreseeable future. So it's a fashion statement. Anyway, thanks for being here, everybody. We will continue with Ashok Beatty's piece next week. And I hope it's been useful. Are you feeling enlightened, Jordan?
Fully. I am afloat in clarity.
Okay. All right. So we'll call this a wrap. And